Five Nights at Freddy's is a game series that has been torn apart from every conceivable angle, and compared to when these games first came out, we know more about these games than ever before. However, the part of the games that are both the most iconic and probably the most interesting are the animatronics themselves. The most interesting part of all these AI breakdowns that have come out in recent years has to be the animatronics AI. So, in this video, I thought I would make a detailed breakdown of every single animatronics AI from the first 7 games. And when I say every animatronic, I mean every single one. From FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 3, FNAF 4, Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location, Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria Simulator, and I'm not doing Ultimate Custom Night because I already did that, and it was an absolute pain. If you're interested, you can watch this video here. Anyways. I won't be covering any of the releases outside of these 7 games, simply because we do not know how the rest of the animatronics work from an AI or coding standpoint. But the 7 mainline games are already going to make this a super long video. Maybe in the future I will make videos on the other games, including FNAF World, but without further ado, grab a drink and a snack, and enjoy this massive AI breakdown. Five Nights at Freddy's 1, being the first game in the series, has had its entire AI stripped and dissected from every single possible angle, which will make this part of the video relatively straightforward. But before I start talking about the characters, let's discuss a very universal mechanic that I'm sure a lot of you know, but for the sake of this video, I do need to mention it. Every animatronic from the Click Team games function on what's called a movement opportunity. How this works is that every single character has a certain interval that they can move on. For example, Freddy from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 has a movement interval every 3.02 seconds. So this means that every 3.02 seconds, Freddy will roll a random number between 1 and 20. If this randomly generated number is less than or equal to whatever Freddy's AI level is, then he will move. So for example, let's say Freddy's AI level is 5. Every 3.02 seconds, Freddy rolls a random number. If that number is say 13, 13 is not less than or equal to 5, so Freddy will not move. But let's say the number is 3. 3 is less than 5, so Freddy will move. Another way to look at this is that every single character has an AI in 20 chance to move on every single one of their movement intervals. This is how the animatronics from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2 decide to move, and it's pretty much the same way in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, 4, Sister Location, Pizzeria Simulator, and UCN. However, there are a couple of differences in those games, which I will get to when we do cover those games. But with that out of the way, let's begin with the FNAF 1 crew, and we will start with Bonnie. Bonnie is the first animatronic of the main 4 to move from Night 1. Bonnie's AI levels on each night are the following. On Night 1, his AI level is 0. On Night 2, his AI level is 3. On Night 3, his AI level is 0. On Night 4, his AI level is 2. On Night 5, his AI level is 5. And on Night 6, his AI jumps to 10. Bonnie's AI levels actually increase as the night goes on, which is why he is able to move on Nights 1 and 3 despite his AI level being 0, which would mean that he is completely inactive. At 2 AM, Bonnie gets a 1 level increase, and the same thing happens again at 3 AM and 4 AM, meaning that on Night 1, Bonnie has an AI level of 3 by the end of the night. Bonnie's movement interval is every 4.97 seconds, and his movement tree looks like this, and he has an equal chance to move from any of these spots, moving from the show stage to either the backstage or the dining room. From there, Bonnie must go to the West Hall before either going to the supply closet or the West Hall corner. Bonnie can approach your door from either the West Hall corner or the supply closet. Once Bonnie is at your left door, he will wait until his next successful movement opportunity. If the left door is closed when this happens, Bonnie will warp to the dining area. If the left door is open, Bonnie will jam the left door, making it impossible to close the left door or use the light. From there, Bonnie will wait until the camera is up to begin his attack. Bonnie will jump scare the player once the camera is pulled down, or until around 25 to 30 seconds has passed, in which case Bonnie will pull down the camera himself and jump scare you anyway. Also, for those who are wondering, no, Bonnie does not teleport. It's just that his movement tree allows him to cover ground very quickly if he succeeds his movements. Although, since Scott said that Bonnie does not abide by the laws of physics, I can see why people think that. Chica is our next animatronic, and she behaves in a very similar way to Bonnie, but with a few differences. Chica's AI levels are the following. On night 1, her AI level is 0, on night 2, her AI level is 1, on night 3, her AI level is 5, on night 4, her AI level is 4, on night 5, her AI level is 7, and on night 6, her AI level is 12. Like Bonnie, Chica's AI levels will increase as the night goes on, adding one AI level at 3 AM and another at 4 AM, meaning that by 4 AM on night 1, she will have an AI level of 2. Chica has a movement interval of 4.98 seconds, and this is her movement tree. Unlike Bonnie, Chica has a much more strict path that she must follow to get to your door. Chica will start on the show stage, and then has to go to the dining room. From there, she can either go to the restrooms or the kitchens. If Chica is in the kitchen, a pots and pans sound will play while she is in there. From there, they can go to the East Hall and then either go back to the dining room or to the East Hall corner. From the East Hall corner, she can either go back to the East Hall or to your door. Chica must enter the East Hall corner in order to attack, and Chica also has the most sprite priority, which I will explain in more detail in the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 section. But basically, 2 or more characters can be in a camera, but only one of those characters will show based on who has a higher sprite priority, and this is just based on how the cameras are actually coded. Chica has sprite priority over Freddy in the East Hall corner camera, meaning that you don't need to check the right door for Chica unless you see her appear on this camera first. Chica attacks behave the exact same way as Bonnie, except that she attacks from the right door. So, with Chica done, we now get into the more unique animatronics of this game. Foxy is probably the most unique animatronic of the bunch, and also the most simple, but even so, a lot of people think he's the most difficult. So, let's start from the top. Foxy's AI levels are the following. On night 1, his AI level is 0, on night 2, his AI level is 1, on night 3, his AI level is 2, on night 4, his AI level jumps to 6, on night 5, his AI level is 6, on night 5, his AI level is 5, and on night 6, his AI level is 6, not 16 like was said in Tech Rules video. I've made the mistake in saying this in my No Cameras challenge, however, even testing, yeah, he's nowhere near as aggressive as he would be for 16 AI. That was just a mistake. Foxy gets a 1 level AI increase at 3 AM and 4 AM just like Chica does. Foxy gets a movement opportunity on every 5.02 second interval, and this interval is paused if you are directly looking at Foxy's camera, which is why he can seem to not move if you want him to. Foxy's movement tree is, well, really simple. Foxy starts in Pirate's Cove, and with every successful movement opportunity, he progresses 1 stage out of Pirate's Cove. Once he's out, he will run down your left hall when you either look at the West Hall camera or after 25 seconds, and then he'll just straight up appear at your door. Foxy has 4 stages in Pirate's Cove. Stage 1 is when he is inside the curtain, Stage 2 is when he is peeking out of the curtain, Stage 3 is when he is outside of the cove, and Stage 4 is when he has left the cove. Foxy's pirate song only plays if Foxy is in Stage 1, so if you hear that at any point, know that he's not on the way. Foxy's movement is affected by your camera use, which is your best way of defending against him. Anytime you are using the camera, Foxy is stalled for the entire time that you are in the camera, and once you leave the camera, Foxy continues to be stalled for a random amount of time that can range from 0.83 seconds to 17.48 seconds. Once Foxy leaves the Pirate Cove, he will wait 25 seconds for you to look at the West Hall camera to perform his sprint animations, otherwise he will appear at the door anyways. Once Foxy is at the door, he will check what stage the door is in and perform the appropriate action. If the door is closed, he will bonk on the door. If the door is closing, he will wait for the door to close and then bonk on the door. If the door is opening, he will wait for the door to open and then enter. And obviously, if the door is open, he will jump scare you. Understanding this mechanic is how people were able to perform what's known as the Foxy Sprite kill glitch, where you can completely delete Foxy from the night entirely. But anyways, if the door is closed, Foxy will take a certain amount of power each time he attacks the door. The first time he hits the door, he will take 1% of power, and then every attack after that, he will take an additional 5% power. So he will take 6% the second time, 11% the third, and so on. Once Foxy has hit the door, he has a 50% chance to start in either Stage 1 or Stage 2 in Pirate Cove. Now, the only other thing about Foxy is that his 25-second kill timer is counted by frames, not seconds, meaning that if you set your FPS level to 1 manually, you can beat the entire night without doing anything. But that's boring and cheating. But now, let's move on to the man of the hour. Freddy is the last of the normal animatronics to activate on normal nights, only starting to move from night 3 onwards. Freddy's AI levels are the following. On night 1, his AI level is 0. On night 2, his AI level is, again, 0. On night 3, his AI level is 1. On night 4, his AI level has a 50% chance to either be 1 or 2. On night 5, his AI level is 3. And on night 6, his AI level is 4. Yeah, Freddy doesn't really get that high in difficulty. Freddy has a movement opportunity every 3.02 seconds, and is actually equally as dangerous on AI level 10 as 20, and I'll explain why later. Also, unlike the other 3, Freddy doesn't receive an AI increase throughout the night. Freddy's movement tree is the most strict of the 4, besides Foxy I suppose. Freddy will start on the show stage and then enter the dining room, then the restrooms, then the kitchen where he will play the Toreador March while he's in there, then he'll move to the East Hall, and finally the East Hall corner. Every time Freddy moves, a random laugh sound effect will play, these are the 3 variants. Freddy's movements themselves are very interesting. Once Freddy gets a successful movement opportunity, he doesn't immediately move. Instead, he starts a countdown, which can be best described as 1000 minus 100 X frames. X is referring to Freddy's AI level. For example, if Freddy is at AI level 1, he will wait 900 frames before he starts moving, which is about 15 seconds. You'll notice that once Freddy reaches AI level 10, this timer starts at 0, which is why I said he technically is the same on 10 and 20 AI. However, with one difference, which is the movement opportunities I said before. This means that past AI level 10, Freddy will instantly move if he succeeds in a movement opportunity. However, Freddy's biggest weakness is the camera itself. While looking at Freddy's camera, Freddy will not move until you either lower the camera or click off his camera. The only exception to this is camera 4B, where if your camera is on Freddy, he will not move no matter what, even if he has a successful movement opportunity and his countdown has finished. While lowering the camera on every other camera will cause Freddy to move, on the East Hall corner, this doesn't happen. However, an entirely new system is in place, and this is how Freddy's attacks work. Once Freddy is in the East Hall corner, and once he has a successful movement opportunity, he will wait until you are looking at a camera that isn't his camera, and then take his movement. If the door is closed, he will enter the East Hall and attempt to get back into your East Hall corner for another attack. If the door is open, he will wait until the camera is closed and attack at random, with him having a 25% chance to jump scare you every second the camera is down. However, if you choose to hide in your camera, he will never force it down himself. The best way to deal with Freddy is to just never take a camera off 4B, since he won't enter the office unless you have clicked on a different camera. The only other factor in Freddy is the power sequence, which is actually extremely straightforward. Once the power goes out, there are 3 phases. No Freddy, Freddy, and then blackout. In phase 1, you have a 20% chance every 5 seconds for Freddy to show up and start playing his song. If he doesn't show up for 20 seconds, he will just show up automatically. And this chance is exactly the same for Freddy to stop playing the music box once he's at the door. After 20 seconds, you are automatically taken to the phase 3 section, which is a 20% chance every 2 seconds. And once this hits, Freddy will jump scare the player. Freddy is easily the most complicated character in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, and is why he is often so difficult. But once you understand him, he's not all that bad. Now, we only have one more animatronic to cover, and that's Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy doesn't have an AI level system, and instead works off the poster in the West Hall corner. While no one can agree on how often this has a chance to appear, with people guessing anything from a 1% chance every time you look at the camera to a 1 in 100,000 chance, the outcome is the same. Once you view the camera, Golden Freddy will enter the office, and fun fact, his sprite is always in the office, you just can't see it until you activate him. If you flip the camera up after seeing him, he will just disappear. If you stare at him for around 3 to 5 seconds, he will jump scare you and crash the game. He also will jump scare you if you type 1987 into the custom night, but that's more of an Easter egg out of an Easter egg. And with that, we have covered every single animatronics AI from the original Five Nights at Freddy's 1 game, which I'm sure most of you already know about. However, now we start getting into the rest of the games, which is where if you know nothing about these games, you may learn something. So let's move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was made just 3 months after the original Five Nights at Freddy's 1 game, so obviously a bunch of the code is exactly the same as the original game. However, there are a few differences in this game, as we have 11 characters rather than 4, so safe to say there's going to be a few differences. A few universal mechanics that I will run through before we start talking about the characters, however. The movement opportunity is exactly the same. However, there is a hidden AI cap when you attempt 1020 mode, which if you're curious, here is the caps. Another thing is the movement intervals, because every single character in this game has the exact same movement interval, which happens on 5 seconds. One more thing I will discuss is sprite priority, which is where multiple characters can occupy the same camera, however only one character will actually appear in the camera. I'll explain which character takes priority in every single section. So let's move on to our first character. Toy Freddy is our first character, and he is quite simple. First, here are his AI levels for each night. Note that unlike Five Nights at Freddy's 1, the animatronics don't automatically increase AI at certain times. This game is a lot more scripted. So here are Toy Freddy's AI levels. On night 1, his AI level is 0, however at 2 AM it's increased to 2. On night 2, his AI level is 0, but at 1 AM it's increased to 1. On night 3, his AI level is 0 for the entire night. On night 4, his AI level is 0 for the entire night. On night 5, his AI level is 5, however at 1 AM it's decreased to 1. And on night 6, his AI level is 0, and at 2 AM it's increased to 5. Now looking at the numbers, Toy Freddy doesn't really appear at all. He really only shows up on nights 1 and 2, and at the start of night 5 as well as night 6. He's actually disrespected so hard. But anyways, here is Toy Freddy's movement tree. One difference between FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 is that characters from Five Nights at Freddy's 2 cannot move backwards, so every single animatronic has a very strict movement tree. So Toy Freddy starts on the show stage and then moves to the game area. Afterwards, he moves to the hallway in front of you and he actually has some pretty high sprite priority, with only Golden Freddy, Toy Chica, Mangle and Foxy together actually being higher than him. But Toy Freddy has 2 phases, being far away and being really close. Once Toy Freddy attacks, which happens on 5-second intervals, also he forces your camera down on 10-second intervals, from here he will stay in your office for 5 seconds, and you will need to put on the mask to get rid of him. This is known as a blackout. The amount of time that you have to put on the mask varies for each night. Here is how much time you have on each night to put the mask on. On night 1, you have 1.667 seconds to put the mask on. On night 2, you have 1.333 seconds to put the mask on. On night 3, you have 1 second to put the mask on. On night 4, you have 0.917 seconds to put the mask on. On night 5, you have 0.833 seconds to put the mask on. And on night 6, you again have 0.883 seconds to put the mask on. If you fail to put the mask on in time, they will jump scare you when you attempt to remove the mask. If you don't put the mask on at all, they will wait until you enter the camera or put on the mask. This is how every single Black Hat animatronic behaves, which includes Withered Bonnie, Withered Chica, and Withered Freddy. Once Toy Freddy finishes his attack, he will return to the show stage. Toy Bonnie works a bit differently to the rest and is actually one of the more unique animatronics in the list. But first, let's discuss his AI levels. On night 1, his AI is 0. At 1 AM, it's increased to 2, and at 2 AM, it's increased to 3. On night 2, his AI level is 0, but at 1 AM, it's increased to 3. On night 3, his AI level is 0, but at 1 AM, it's increased to 1. On night 4, his AI level is 0, but at 2 AM, it's increased to 2. On night 5, his AI level is 2 for the whole night. On night 6, his AI level is 2, but at 2 AM, it's increased to 5. Toy Bonnie's movement path starts him on the show stage. He then moves to Party Room 3, and then Party Room 4, before moving to Party Room 2. Then entering your right vent before appearing in your right vent opening, which you can see with the light. Toy Bonnie moves into the vent blind spot on a 3.33 second window rather than his 5-second interval, so that's something to keep in mind. Once he is in your vent blind spot and you put on the mask, he has a 50% chance every 0.5 seconds to leave the vent and begin his attacks, which is similar to how the blackouts work, but it's a little bit different. Afterwards, he will go back to the show stage. Toy Chica is the first of our main vent animatronics. Toy Bonnie is technically still, but he's a bit different. Toy Chica's AI levels are the following. On night 1, her AI level is 0, and at 1 AM it's increased to 2. On night 2, her AI level is 0, and at 1 AM it's increased to 3. On night 3, her AI level is 0, and at 1 AM it's increased to 1. On night 4, her AI level is 0. On night 5, her AI level is 2. And on night 6, her AI level is 0 and increased to 5 at 2 AM. Toy Chica will start on the show stage and then go to the main hall, then the hallway in front of the player, and she has pretty high hall priority. Afterwards, she will go to party room 1, and then enter your left vent, and then enter your left vent blind spot. Once she enters here, she has a kill timer that lasts for 6 seconds before she is able to jump scare you, meaning during this time, you can be in the camera. Once this timer is up, she will jump scare you the next time you look at the camera. Once you put on the mask, Toy Chica has a 1 in 10 chance to leave the vent every second, but will leave automatically after 5 seconds. Mangle is the second of our vent animatronics, and here are the AI levels for each night. On night 1, her AI level is 0, on night 2, her AI level is 0, and at 1 AM it's increased to 3, on night 3, her AI is 0, on night 4, her AI is 5, on night 5, her AI is 2, and on night 6, her AI is 1, and at 1 AM it's increased to a whopping 10. Mangle will emit a radio static noise in every single camera that they are present in. And when they are in the office, you will constantly hear the static effect until they leave. Mangle will start in the Kids Cove and then move to the game area. Also, Mangle has the wonderful property of not appearing on our plane of existence, since she just seems to be a PNG slapped over the actual image of the camera, with the flashlight going through her sometimes. Anyways, from the game area, Mangle will move into the main hall and then the hallway in front of you. This is the only place where Mangle will not emit sound. Mangle takes pretty high priority here if Foxy is in the hall as well, otherwise it's actually pretty low. From there, she enters party room 2 and then your right vent, and then your vent blind spot. Mangle cannot enter the office from the right vent into the blind spot until the camera is up. Afterwards, she'll be waiting to attack. If you pull the camera up once she's in the vent blind spot, she will instantly enter the office and wait at the top of the office and wait until you enter the camera to attack. Her exact kill timer is unknown, but if it's similar to her ultimate Castle Knight timer, she has a 1 in 30 chance every second, but this could be wrong. Let me know if you know her actual kill chance in the comments below. Mangle has the same 1 in 10 chance to leave the vent every second and will automatically leave after 5 seconds. Balloon Boy is the only animatronic who cannot actually kill the player, however that doesn't make him any less of a threat. BB's AI levels are the following. On night 1, his AI is 0, on night 2, his AI is 0, at 1 AM it's increased to 3, on night 3, his AI level is 1, and at 1 AM it's increased to 2, on night 4, his AI level is 3, on night 5, his AI is 5, and on night 6, his AI level is 5, and at 2 AM it's increased to 9. Balloon Boy is only present on 2 cameras, being in the game area and the left vent. However, he doesn't actually teleport, which I used to believe, but he doesn't. Balloon Boy will move from the game area to the main hall, then party room 2, before being in the left vent, meaning that by his 5th laugh, which he laughs whenever he moves just like Freddy does from Five Nights at Freddy's 1, he will be in the vent blind spot. BB's attacks work the exact same as Mangle, however one difference is once he gets in, instead of killing you or waiting to kill you, he will disable your flashlight and begin laughing at you for the rest of the night. Balloon Boy is also the only character who cannot be stalled by the flashlight in the camera, which is the mechanic I want to explain before we move on to the wizards. Every character can actually be stalled in the camera if you shine the flashlight on them, stunning them for 6.66 seconds, meaning you can theoretically stall all the characters from getting into your office, which is a strategy that's known as the -7 strategy, which is also the strategy I use for my FNAF 2 No Mask run. However, if you watch that video at all, you know that Balloon Boy sucks. But anyways, the only exception to the flash rule is no animatronic can be stalled from their starting camera. So Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, and Toy Chica cannot be stalled on the show stage, which is why you cannot stall any of the wizards, including Withered Foxy, in the parts and service camera. And speaking of the wizards, let's cover them. Starting with Withered Freddy. Withered Freddy's AI levels are the following. On nights 1 and 2, his AI level is 0. On night 3, his AI level is 0, but at 1 AM it's increased to 2. On night 4, his AI level is 0, but at 2 AM it's increased to 3. On night 5, his AI level is 2, but at 1 AM it's increased to 5. On night 6, his AI level is 5, and at 2 AM it's increased to 10. Withered Freddy will start in the parts and service room, then enter the main hall. Withered Freddy then enters the main hall in front of you, and he probably has the lowest sprite priority out of every single character. Withered Freddy also has a chance to go to Party Room 3. Withered Freddy's attacks work exactly the same as Toy Freddy and the other Withers, where he'll enter the office and perform a blackout attack. Not much to say here, so for the next two characters, we will go a bit quicker as well, so let's get into it. First, Withered Bonnie. Here are Withered Bonnie's AI levels. On nights 1 and 2, his AI level is 0. On night 3, his AI level is 1, and at 1 AM it's increased to 2. On night 4, his AI level is 1, and at 2 AM it's increased to 4. On night 5, his AI level is 2, and at 1 AM it's increased to 5. On night 6, his AI level is 5, and at 2 AM it's increased to 10. Withered Bonnie will start in the parts and service cam, then the main hall. He then has the brightest priority in this camera. He will then go to the main hall. From there, he will go to Party Room 1 and then your left vent. From there, he will enter the office after the next cam flip, or if you stay in the camera for over 10-second interval, he will force the camera down. His attacks behave the exact same way as every other blackout attack. Withered Chica is the last of our blackout animatronics, and here are Withered Chica's AI levels. On nights 1 and 2, her AI level is 0. On nights 3, her AI level is 1, and at 1 AM it's increased to 2. On night 4, her AI level is 0, and at 2 AM it's increased to 4. On night 5, her AI level is 2, and at 1 AM it's increased to 5. On night 6, her AI level is 5, and at 1 AM it's increased to 10. She will start in the parts and service room before moving to Party Room 4, then Party Room 2, then the right vent, and then your office. Her attacks work exactly the same as Withered Bonnie's. So now we move on to probably the most complicated character in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, that being Withered Foxy. For starters, let's go over his AI levels for each night. On night 1, his AI level is 0. On night 2, his AI level is 0, but at 1 AM it's increased to 1. On night 3, his AI level is 2, but at 1 AM it's increased to 3. On night 4, his AI level jumps to 7. On night 5, his AI level is 5, and at 1 AM it's increased to 7. On night 6, his AI level is 10, and at 2 AM it increases to 15, which is only 2 away from his 1020 AI cap. Withered Foxy's moves work a bit differently compared to the rest of the characters. Every 5 seconds, Foxy attempts a movement. Once he is in your hall, this equation here will determine Foxy's kill state. The random number is basically the amount of leeway that you get, so the higher the number, the more time you have to flash Foxy, which is random each and every night you play. However, the most important part of this equation is this D value here. This represents the number of seconds that Foxy hasn't had the flashlight shined on him. This means that if Foxy fails movements, this chance to succeed will increase. However, whenever you flash the hallway, even if Foxy isn't actually there apparently, although I could be wrong, this D value is reset. If this value is not true when he succeeds at an opportunity to move, he will leave the hallway. However, if this outcome is true, Foxy will flag you in a state called Got You. Once this happens, Foxy will jump scare you the next time you flash the hall on the next 10-second interval. One more thing about Withered Foxy's AI, which you need to know, is that the D value, which is the amount of time counted in seconds that the flashlight isn't shown on Foxy, is paused when you are in a blackout attack from the other Withereds or Toy Freddy. So there we are. Let's move on to the last few characters. Golden Freddy is actually really interesting in his AI movements, as they are a little bit different from the rest, and he actually hasn't a chance to appear from night 2 onwards. However, it is a stupidly low chance. So instead of reading it out because it's a bit complicated, I'm just going to show his AI levels here on screen. Golden Freddy has 2 ways of attacking the player, from the hallway and in your office. Let's start with the hallway, as it's a bit more complicated. Every 1 second, if his AI level is greater than 0 and you're not using the flashlight, he has a chance to appear in the hallway. When a second passes, an internal value is set from a random number from 0 to 10. If this number happens to be 1 and no one is currently in the hallway, he will appear there. When your hallway light is on while he's there, an internal value that increases by 1 every frame starts. If this value reaches 100, he kills you. Since this game runs on 30 frames per second, you will die if the flashlight is on him for 33.33 seconds. This is only if you leave the flashlight on him. If you flash him a second time after he appears the first time, he will just straight up kill you anyways. However, the chance is that Golden Freddy will appear in the office instead. Every 5 seconds, the game creates a random number between 0 and 20. If his AI is greater than that, he'll appear. In this case, he acts like the blackout animatronics where you need to put on the mask within a certain time frame. Just don't do this too quickly as the game needs to register this, of course. Golden Freddy will stay in the office and cue his jump scare until you perform an action if you don't take one. And lastly, Golden Freddy can only appear in your office once the camera is up. The last of our main characters from this game is the puppet. The puppet does actually work on AI levels, and here are all the puppet's AI levels. On night 1, his AI level is 0, but at 1 AM it's increased to 1. On night 2, his AI is 5. On night 3, his AI is 8. On night 4, his AI is 9. On night 5, his AI is 10. And on night 6, his AI level is 15. Now this AI level doesn't actually affect the speed of the music box itself, but instead it affects the amount of time that it will take the puppet to reach your office, since funny enough, the puppet does actually have a movement path they need to take in order to get to your office. Once she's at your office, she has a 1 in 10 chance every second to kill you, which means theoretically, she has a chance to never ever kill you. I've actually seen the puppet not kill a player for like a whole solid 2 minutes. But now let's go over the puppet's music box wind down. Basically, the music box timer has a value of 2000, and every 50 milliseconds, a certain value is subtracted. This value is different for each and every night in Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Here are the values for each night. On night 1, the value is 2 by 2 AM. On night 2, the value is 2. On night 3, the value is 3. On night 4, the value is 4. On night 5, the value is 5. And on night 6 and 7, this value is 6. With these values, here's how long it takes for the music box to fully wind down on each night. On night 1, this takes about 50 seconds. On night 2, it takes about 50 seconds. On night 3, it takes 33.33 seconds. On night 4, it takes 25 seconds. On night 5, it takes 20 seconds. And on night 6 and 7, it takes 16.67 seconds for the puppet to leave the music box. The only other thing I have to say about the puppet is that if you flash the puppet as they are leaving the box, you can stall them for a second. And that's every character. But before we move on, there's 2 more things to discuss. I'm going to explain how the ambience hallway sound actually works, as it's actually tied to animatronic movement. This noise will trigger when Withered Foxy, Toy Freddy, or Withered Freddy appear in the hallway, when Withered Chica, Toy Bonnie, or Mangle have entered Party Room 2, and finally the noise will play when Withered Bonnie or Toy Chica are in Party Room 1. If there is no character in any of these positions, the noise will not play. Now finally, let's discuss the 5 secret characters in this game. Yeah, you thought we were done, but we're not. The Paper Pal is the most simple. He has a random AI value which consists of a random number between 1 and 100 plus 1 divided by 100, which only happens on night 7. When he succeeds, you'll see him in the office. Shadow Bonnie is quite simple as well. He has a 1 in 1 million chance to appear every time the monitor is dropped. If he appears, he will crash the game after 4 seconds, and there's nothing you can do to prevent this. Shadow Freddy, JJ, and the Endo all work on the exact same system. Every time you put down the camera, a value known as a random image value will roll a number between 0 and 1000. If this number is less than or equal to 100 and the puppet is out of the music box, the Endo will appear in the puppet's camera. If this value is the number 3, the endoskeleton will appear in the left vent. If this is the number 9, JJ will appear under the desk the next time you lower the monitor. And last but not least, if this number is less than or equal to 100 and no one is in the parts and service camera, Shadow Freddy will appear. And that is every single character from Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Now, let's move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 3, which is a game that hasn't actually been discussed that much, so you'll definitely learn something here. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is a little bit different compared to the first 2 games, as the AI and 20 chance doesn't work the exact same as it does in the previous game. But on top of that, only one animatronic can actually kill you. that being Springtrap. So let's start with him and then go on to the rest of the cast, as Springtrap is probably the most complicated character so far, and probably the most complicated character out of every single one of these games. Springtrap does actually have an AI level just like in the previous games, however it's used differently. Firstly, Springtrap's AI levels are the same as the night number, so on night 2 he has an AI level of 2, and this goes for every single night except night 6, where he gets an increased AI level of 7. Now for Springtrap's movement formula. It's a little bit complicated. This is the formula that defines his movement. Don't worry, I'll do my best to explain it. The first part of this just explains that this code will run every single second, meaning that this code will run 348 times, as FNAF 3 nights last for 5 minutes and 48 seconds. The move counter will go up by 1 each second unless you have the aggressive cheat on, in which it will go up by 2 per second. This movement counter is then compared to the next 3 values. These 3 are the AI value, the aggressive factor, and the total turns value. The AI value is simple, as it's just Springtrap's AI level. The aggressive factor is a separate value that usually starts at 0 unless one of the following 4 events occur. A phantom animatronic jump scares you, a ventilation error occurs, the player has been idle in the office for more than 10 seconds, or the time of the night is past 4 AM. If any of these 4 factors are true, then the aggressive factor will be changed from a 0 to a 1, meaning that he will be more aggressive if these factors are true. The final factor, the total turns, determines where Springtrap will actually move once he gets a chance to. This number starts from 1 and goes to 4, with 1 meaning he won't move, and the others determining which camera he will actually move to. On top of all of this, a random number between 1 and 15 is selected to add to the overall value. Once this movement counter exceeds the overall value, Springtrap will be allowed a movement. Again, this is related to the total turns value, which is increased by 1 every time he fails a movement, meaning the more movements he fails, the more likely that he is actually to move. Depending on which camera he is in, this value number affects where he will go. As I said before, a value of 1 means he won't move anywhere. A value of 2 means that he will move backwards. A value of 3 means that he will move forwards. And if in a room with a vent, a value of 4 means that he will enter that vent. On the subject of vents, Springtrap is not able to enter the vents until it is 1 AM. If Springtrap is in a vent, he will move based on the state of the vent snare. If he gets a successful movement and the vent snare is closed, he will go back to the original camera, and if not, he will go through. The one other factor with Springtrap is his attack phase. Once Springtrap reaches the window looking at you, he is in phase 1 of his attack phase. Once in phase 1, he can only progress to the next stage if the total turns value is greater than 2, meaning he can only move with a value of 3 or 4. Once he succeeds, he will cue his movement to move across with his running animation when you either look at the camera or over at the maintenance panel. This is why if you time it right, you can still have Springtrap run over even if you lured him back to cam 2, he just cued his movement. Once in phase 2, he will run across to the blind spot and then be in phase 3. Once in phase 3, he will run the same numbers from 1 to 4 again, and will complete an action once you are either looking at a screen or a blackout occurs. If this number is 2, he will move to cam 1. If this number is greater than 2, then he will progress straight to phase 4, which is when he is peeking in the office from the door. Once in phase 4, he will be able to kill you if a blackout occurs or if you flip the maintenance panel. He will also kill you if you look towards the other side of the room. If he happens to be on the other side of the room inside the camera once he progresses to phase 4, he will instead run to the other side of the room, and from there, he will jump scare you once you have been in the camera for a collective second, which is how the FPG or Freddy gameplay strategy was born, but more on that later. If Springtrap makes it to either the cam 2 or cam 10 vent, then he will be at the right side of the office and will also kill you in the same way. Now let's talk about audio lures and hallucinations. Audio lures are quite simple. When you press the audio lure button, the game does 2 things. The first thing it does is roll a random number between 1 and 7. If this number is the number 1, then the lure will just straight up not work. So in other words, the audio lure has a 1 in 7 chance not to work. If you get any other number though, the game then checks if Springtrap is in a connecting camera. If he is, then he will automatically be lured to that spot. Hallucinations are only possible if you are in a ventilation error, and this basically just makes it so that Springtrap can appear in multiple cameras at once, even if he's not there. Pretty simple. Our last point about Springtrap is the various sound effects Springtrap emits. Every time Springtrap moves in the building, he plays this footstep sound. This is super useful if you want to know if he's moving while you're doing something else. The next two sounds are the vent sounds. This is the sound of him entering the vent and leaving a sealed vent. And this is the sound that plays when Springtrap has made it through a vent. The last two sounds are the two danger sounds. This first one plays once Springtrap has entered cameras 5, 4, or 3. And this sound is what plays if Springtrap is either in cam 2 or in his attack phase. And with that, we have covered everything you need to know about Springtrap. That was a mouthful. So to wrap up Five Nights at Freddy's 3, let's talk about the 6 Phantom animatronics and how they work. For general Phantom mechanics, no Phantom is able to spawn until 1 AM. But once a Phantom has jump scared you, they can't spawn for the rest of the night. But let's go in order of appearances, starting with Phantom BB. Phantom BB is the first Phantom that you can encounter, starting to appear from night 2 onwards. The way he works is pretty simple. He has an opportunity to spawn every 20 seconds if you don't have your camera up. His chance of spawning is basically his AI level divided by 10, so for night 2, it's a 2 in 10 chance. Once he is able to spawn, he will appear on cams 1, 7, 9, and 10. He can't spawn on any other camera. If you see him, you have a set amount of time in order to get rid of him before he attacks. This changes each night. On night 2, you get 90 frames, on night 3, you get 80 frames, on night 4, you get 70 frames, on night 5, you get 60 frames, on night 6, you get 50 frames. To get rid of Phantom Balloon Boy, you either need to switch off his camera or close the camera system entirely. If you don't do this, he will jump scare you and cause a ventilation error. One more thing to note is that at 3 AM, he will automatically spawn when the camera is closed. Phantom Mangle starts appearing on night 2 and behaves exactly the same as Phantom BB. In fact, both Phantom Chica and Puppet behave this way too. The only difference is that they are tied to a specific camera, which in Phantom Mangle's case is camera 4. All 3 will spawn at 5 AM automatically. If you look at Phantom Mangle for too long, instead of causing a ventilation error like the rest of the cast, she will disable the audio lure and scream at you for a little bit. Phantom Chica starts appearing from night 3 onwards and behaves the same as Balloon Boy, except that she appears on camera 7 with this creepy looking arcade machine. However, if you look at her for too long, instead of getting instantly jump scared, she will wait for you to look over at the maintenance panel to jump scare you, and then cause a ventilation error. Phantom Puppet is again the same as Phantom BB and Chica, except that she spawns on camera 8 and becomes active from night 4. If you look at her for too long, you are stuck in a 17-second cutscene where you can't do anything but stare at the puppet, and you will get a ventilation error. Phantom Freddy becomes active on night 3 onwards, and he functions a bit differently compared to the rest of the cast. Every 60 seconds, Phantom Freddy has a chance to spawn. When he spawns, he will walk across your window in front of you, and you need to hide in either the maintenance panel or the camera to avoid him. The amount of time that you can look at him is a bit more than BB. Actually, it's 3 times higher. On night 3, you have 240 frames, on night 4, you have 210 frames, on night 5, you have 180 frames, and on night 6, you have 150 frames. If you look at him for too long, he will duck down, and then you have a 50% chance every second to get jump scared by him, which causes a ventilation error. He also gets forcefully spawned at 4 AM. Our last Phantom in Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is Phantom Foxy, and is probably the most random of all the characters, never getting forcibly spawned at a certain time of the others. He will get to spawn opportunity every time that you open your camera monitor, and fun fact, he actually has a good chance to spawn starting night 2. However, like Golden Freddy, it's pretty rare. On night 2, he has a 1 in 1000 chance to spawn, on night 3 he has a 1 in 50 chance to spawn, on night 4 he has a 1 in 25 chance to spawn, on night 5 and 6 he has a 1 in 10 chance to spawn. If you fully look at him, he will jump scare you and cause a ventilation error. However, before I finish up FNAF 3, there's one more thing to mention. Once you get jump scared by a Phantom, you get a 10-second scare cooldown where any other Phantom can't jump scare you regardless of if they are active or not. And this is most noticeable with Foxy, as you can get jump scared by, say, Phantom Balloon Boy, and then just watch Phantom Foxy stare at you for 10 seconds. And that is Five Nights at Freddy's 3 done and dusted. Our most complicated and yet most simple animatronic so far. So now let's move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was a very different departure from the series in a lot of ways, taking place in a child's bedroom rather than a children's pizzeria. However, they are also brought back a lot of the original elements, including the original 0 to 20 AI system from the first two games. Like Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the animatronics move on 5-second intervals, and like Five Nights at Freddy's 3, there are 4 spawn points at certain times, but I'll cover those when I get to it. So let's begin with the 4 main animatronics. Nightmare Freddy is the first character we'll be covering, as he's the first character that you'll probably encounter in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Here are his AI levels. On night 1, his AI level is 0, at 2 AM it's increased to 1, and at 3 AM it's increased to 2. On night 2, his AI level is 2 and increased to 3 at 3 AM. On night 3, his AI level is 3, on night 4, his AI level is 4, and on night 6, his AI level is 5. On Nightmare mode, his AI level is 6. The way he works is actually pretty simple. Nightmare Freddy spawns on the bed behind you, and every 4 seconds he will add his AI level to his progress. On nights 2 and onwards, he will progress by 5 per second if you don't move in 30 seconds. Freddy's progress can be visually seen by the number of Freddles that are on the bed. At 10 progress, 1 Freddle will spawn. At 20 progress, 2 Freddles will spawn. And at 30 progress, 3 Freddles will spawn. You can also hear the progress of the Freddles at a volume of 1 at 20 progress and a volume at 2 at 30 progress. Once you reach 60 progress, Nightmare Freddy will be in his kill state and will kill the player the next time they flash the bed, or on 3 seconds intervals if they are looking at the bed. However, once he reaches 80 progress, he will jump scare the player regardless. Nightmare Bonnie is the first of the 3 hallway animatronics, and like Five Nights at Freddy's 1, he appears on the left side. Here are Nightmare Bonnie's AI levels for each night. On night 1, his AI level is 0, on night 2, his AI level is 5, on night 3, his AI level is 7, on night 4, his AI level is 10, on night 6, his AI level is 12, and on Nightmare mode, his AI level is 15. And also, on 420 mode, his AI level is, well, 20. Nightmare Bonnie gains 1 AI level at 2 AM and an extra 2 AI at 3 AM. Nightmare Bonnie's movement path is pretty simple, but before we talk about that, both Nightmare Bonnie and Nightmare Chica will fail all their respective movement opportunities if any of these factors occur. If you are listening to their respective door, if you have just cleared one of them from the door but haven't opened the door yet, and if you close the door on them when they weren't at the door. Now onto the movement themselves. Nightmare Bonnie will start at the center of the hallway and progresses to the left side of the far hall. Then the far side of the left hall, where you can flash him back. Also, Nightmare Bonnie won't enter this hallway if the light is already on him. When this happens, Nightmare Bonnie can update his position, which he has a 50% chance to do every second, and if he succeeds, he will automatically move to the new location. If he succeeds an opportunity while in the far hallway and you're not at his door, then he will move to your door. Nightmare Bonnie will also automatically warp to your door if you have closed the door while he wasn't there. Once Nightmare Bonnie is at the door, he can actually move backwards away from the door, but only over 10-second intervals. On 420 mode, you can use it as the strat that is known as the Braden strat in order to just wait until they move back into the far hall and then flash them away. This is also how FNAF 4 was beaten without doors. But anyways, once Bonnie has been at your door for 20 seconds, minus the night number, he will jump scare you the next time that you look at the bed. Nightmare Bonnie, however, gives you an extra second to work with, so for him, it's more like 21 minus the night number. Here are the values. Night 1 he gives you 20 seconds, Night 2 he gives you 19 seconds, Night 3 he gives you 18 seconds, Night 4 he gives you 17 seconds, Night 5 he gives you 16 seconds, Night 6 he gives you 15 seconds, Nightmare 9 he gives you 14 seconds, and on 420 mode he gives you 13 seconds. This is why it seems like Nightmare Bonnie doesn't kill you on the bed as often as Nightmare Chica does. It's just a 1 second differences. These are also cumulative seconds however, meaning that if Bonnie is at your door for 5 seconds, then leaves without you clearing him, then comes back, he will save that 5 seconds. The only way to reset this number is to completely clear him from the door, which you can do by obviously closing the door. You can tell if Nightmare Bonnie is at the door by listening for a breathing sound, which sounds like this. Once you do this, Nightmare Bonnie will leave over the next 3-second interval. You know what happens if you flash the door. Next we have Nightmare Chica, who is almost a carbon copy of Nightmare Bonnie, with her having the same AI values for each night. She also behaves the same except her movement tree and her kill timer. She will start in the middle hallway like Bonnie and move to the right side of this hallway. From there, she can either go to the right hall, where you can see and flash her, or she can go to the kitchen, in which you will hear this sound effect play. If she moves to the kitchen, she can only move back to the far hall. She can't go from the kitchen to your right hallway. She behaves the same once she's at your door, except she doesn't give you the same extra second that Bonnie does, making these her values. Night 1 she gives you 19 seconds, Night 2 she gives you 18 seconds, Night 3 she gives you 17 seconds, Night 4 she gives you 16 seconds, Night 5 she gives you 15 seconds, Night 6 she gives you 14 seconds, Nightmare Night she gives you 13 seconds, and on 420 mode she gives you 12 seconds. And now we move on to our last main character, Nightmare Foxy. Nightmare Foxy works a bit differently and is often regarded as the most difficult character in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Firstly, here are all of Nightmare Foxy's AI levels for each night. On Night 1 his AI is 0, on Night 2 his AI is 1, on Night 3 his AI is increased to a whopping 10, on Night 4 his AI level is 5, on Night 6 his AI level is 10, on Nightmare Night his AI level is 15, and on 420 mode his AI level is 20. At 3 AM on Night 2, Foxy's AI level increases by 3, and on 3 AM of Night 4, it's increased by 10. Foxy has two phases. Phase 1, Foxy will start in the middle hallway with Bonnie and Chica and can move to either side of the room, making this sound as he moves. Once at a side, Foxy has a 90% chance to move to the opposite side of the room and a 10% chance to move into the hallway. If you flash him while he is in the hallway, he will move back into the main hallway. If you go to the opposite door of the hallway that Foxy is in, he will run into your closet and progress to phase 2. Phase 2 is known as the closet phase. Once he enters, he starts a random value from 3 to 7 progress. Every 5 seconds, his progress is increased by 1, but every second that you have the door closed on him, his progress decreases by 1. At 0 to 1 progress, he's a plushie. At 2 to 3 progress, he will be standing up in the closet. At 4 to 5 progress, he'll be crouching, and from 6 to 10 progress, he'll be peeking out of the closet. Once he reaches 10 progress, he will jump scare you the next time you move back into the middle of the room, or when you turn away from the bed. If you AFK and look at the bed for 15 seconds, he kills you anyways. And that's the 4 main animatronics done. However, we still have a few more characters in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Let's begin with Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare, who are basically the exact same characters, the only differences being their AI level. Let's start with Nightmare Fredbear. On Night 5 he has an AI level of 12, and on Night 6 he has an AI level of 16. Nightmare on both nights he appears in has an AI level of 20. Nightmare Fredbear gets a movement opportunity every 3 seconds, while Nightmare gets one every 2 seconds. They will walk across the top hallway making this sound. Once at one side, they can either move to the other side or silently move into the hallway. Once they are in a hall, you need to close the door on them. If you don't, they will kill you after 15 seconds on nights 5 and 6, 10 seconds on Nightmare, and 8 seconds on 420 mode. If you flash the hallway, it will cause them to approach faster, which means that they will kill you if you have the flashlight on them for about a second. Nightmare and Nightmare Fredbear can also silently teleport to the closet or bed if they have been on a side of the room for 10 seconds, and then you go to the opposite side. However, on night 7 and 8, you will die before this happens. The other way they will get into your room is by laughing. First, let's discuss real laughs. Every second, a value counts up to either 1 or 2, and this can change every second. Once one of these values reaches 30 for Nightmare Fredbear or 20 for Nightmare, they will have a 50% chance to teleport to either the bed or closet and laugh. If it's a value of 1, they will teleport to the bed, and if it's 2, they will go to the closet. They can do this 4 times on night 5, but every other night they can only do this 2 times. Also, if they spawn on the bed, their interval timer will get paused, which is useful if you're using a stopwatch. Once they are in your room, Fredbear will kill you after 20 seconds or 10 seconds if you look at the bed, while Nightmare only takes 11. Fake laughs are much simpler, as they have a 10% chance every 10 seconds to do a fake laugh if they aren't already in your room. And last but not least, they will kill you if you remain AFK for 25 seconds. So now, let's move on to Plushtrap. Plushtrap has his own special minigame in between each night, and they look like this. Plushtrap will give you a certain amount of time each night in order to complete his minigames. You get 90 seconds on night 2, 60 seconds on night 3, 45 seconds on night 4, and 30 seconds on night 5 and onwards. If you complete this minigame, you get to skip 2 hours of that night, but how exactly does Plushtrap work? Plushtrap runs on an aggressive meter that goes up by 1 each frame the flashlight isn't on, with an additional bonus aggressive meter every frame, which is a random value of 0, 1 or 2. Plushtrap's movement opportunities happen on 2-second intervals, which checks if the aggressive meter is higher than a random number from 400 to 499. If this succeeds, he moves and his aggressive meter resets to 200. If you shine the light, his aggressive meter resets to 0. Once he is on the X, he is guaranteed to kill you the next time he gets a movement, which is on 2 seconds. So in other words, once he makes it to the X, you have 2 seconds to flash him. Now, last but not least, we have the various Halloween characters. Jacko Bonnie and Jacko Chica behave the exact same way as their non-Halloween counterparts. However, Nightmare Mangle has one difference, is that they will make a radio static noise while they're in the closet. Nightmare Beyond is the same as Nightmare, but with a music box sound that plays. And finally, we have Nightmare BB, who is slightly different than Plushtrap. Nightmare BB's aggressiveness bonus is from 0 to 4 rather than 0 to 2. He has a 1 in 3 chance to play a sound effect when he moves, but is guaranteed to make the sound effect when he moves to the X. Unlike Plushtrap, he only gives you a whopping 0.5 seconds to flash him before he kills you. Also, he only lets you skip 1 hour rather than 2. And that is every single FNAF 4 character. Now we get to move on to the most different of all the Five Nights at Freddy's game, and probably the one that has the least known about in terms of AI, that being Sister Location. Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location is the most different of all the games so far. There are 2 separate game modes, the first being the main story, which focuses on scripted events each night, while the custom night is more similar to regular Five Nights at Freddy's gameplay. I will start with the main story first, going through each night and discussing those characters before moving on to the custom night. So let's get started. For the main game, our first character that appears is a group of characters, the Biddy Babs, who appear on night 2. For those wondering, nothing happens on night 1. This first minigame requires you to defend yourself against the Biddy Babs using a piece of metal to defend yourself. The minigame doesn't actually start until you fully shut the metal door. The metal door is pulled by the player at 5 pixels per frame, being fully closed at 1700 pixels. 63 seconds after you initially pull the sheet closed, the Biddy Babs will start pulling the metal sheet at 2 pixels per frame. While you are pulling the frame back, you only pull 1 pixel per frame. However, you have a 2 out of 3 chance to pull 1 extra pixel. This attack lasts for 10 seconds. 20 seconds after the first attack, a second attack occurs, which also lasts for 20 seconds. Once you pull the sheet back, the minigame ends after 15 seconds. A Biddy Bab can spawn after 7 seconds of the metal grate being closed. It will move to a random hole and can change its position every 4 to 7 seconds. If you look at the eyes of a Biddy Bab, you just trigger the attack earlier. You will die from the Biddy Babs if the metal sheet is pulled 800 pixels away from the end. Now let's move on to our second minigame of night 2, the Ballora minigame, which is also my personal favourite. Ballora operates based on your W key being held down, which is why the W spam strat exists, because simply pressing the W key moves the player forward by 14 frames. Every frame that you are moving without holding shift, you increase the counter by 1. If you hold shift, you increase this by 2. Once this counter reaches 5, it resets and you earn 1 progress, and you succeed once you reach 850 progress. However, note that running will get you 6 progress, but the additional 1 progress is not counted, so it's actually slightly more effective to walk, but it's not really that noticeable. Now that we have established how the player moves, let's discuss Ballora, as she is tied to this movement. Ballora starts 600 units away from the player, which is the furthest she can possibly be. If she reaches 0 units from the player, then you die. Every 2 seconds, if you aren't holding W, she chooses a random moving number from 0 to 2. If this number is 2, every frame that you are holding W, she will move 1 unit closer, and 2 units if you're also holding the shift key. If this number is 1 or 2, every 0.1 seconds, she will check if you are holding W, and if so, move 1 unit closer. So in other words, about 10 units a second. If the value is 0 or 1, Every 0.03 seconds that you aren't holding the W key, she will move 1 unit away from the player. If you have held W for more than 5 seconds, the moving value is automatically set to 2. Basically, the more you hold the W key, the closer she will get. The volume of Crumbling Dreams is tied to how close she is to you, and you'll notice that even if you don't move, it changes, because Bellora will move around on her own, but not by much. That's pretty much her base AI, but there are 2 scripted events that can affect the minigame. The first is the hand unit telling you that you are taking too long. This happens once you have made 300 total progress, and Bellora is at least 400 units away from the player. For the next 100 frames, she will move closer by a unit. However, if she is too close, the line will not trigger until she is outside that 400 unit threshold. The second event is the Bellora silhouette. This triggers at 400 progress, while she is on the right side of the room. The distance increases by 2 every frame, and the moving number is set to 2. While on the left side, it decreases by 1, and her moving number is set to 1. And now we move on to the last Night 2 minigame, which is Funtime Freddy's minigame in the Breaker Room. The Breaker Room minigame is very simple. Reboot every system while gaslighting the shit out of Funtime Freddy. Funtime Freddy has a progress bar like Bellora, and like Bellora, it only goes up if you are pressing one of the reset buttons. At 1 progress, Freddy will be on his stage. At 2 progress, Funtime Freddy will be at the front of his stage. At 3 progress, he will be at the far end of the left side. At 4 progress, he will be right in front of you. And at 5 progress, he won't even be visible at all. At 6 progress, he will jump scare the player if the hand unit is down, when you next flip up the hand unit, or after 7 seconds if the hand unit is still up. Funtime Freddy's check to progress happens on 2-second intervals. There is a 50% chance of increasing Funtime Freddy's progress by 1 or 2, meaning that if you time it properly from the start of the minigame, you can just not hold the button over 2-second intervals and be safe. If you have the hand unit up but are not pressing anything, there is a 50% chance of decreasing his progress by 1 every 4 seconds, if the room isn't lit with sparks, which has a 50% chance to occur every 0.5 seconds. If the hand unit is down, there is a 50% chance for Freddy to decrease his progress by 1, once every 3.5 seconds if your danger level is medium, and 3 seconds if your danger level is green. And that's everything you need to know about Night 2. So now we move on to Night 3 with Funtime Foxy and Funtime Freddy again. Well, at least it's technically 5 Nights at Freddy's. Funtime Foxy's minigame is very similar to the Bellora minigame in concept, however there are a few changes. Every frame you crawl, you will progress by a value of 1, 2 if you are sprinting. After letting go of W, you move forward for 15 frames. To win, you need to get to a value of 2000. While you are pressing W, Funtime Foxy gets 1 or 2 units closer. Not pressing W decreases this value by 1. Like Bellora, Funtime Foxy starts 600 units away and kills you once you reach 0. When you use the flash, if Funtime Foxy is further than 200 units away from you, he will approach by 50 units. If you flash when he is closer than 200 units, you instantly die. Here is the visual progress for each stage. If he is between 600 and 500 progress, Funtime Foxy does not appear. Between 500 and 400 progress, he appears far from the player, slightly to the left side of the room. Once you reach 1300 progress, Funtime Foxy won't show up here. Once between 400 and 200, he appears closer to the player with his arms in an A pose. He won't appear here past 1700 progress. Finally, if Funtime Foxy is less than 200 progress away, he will be much closer with his arms in a T pose. Then the only other thing you need to know is that every 3 seconds, he will randomly choose to either approach or move away, either subtracting or adding 1 every frame. And that's Funtime Foxy. Now to the easiest character of this night. Funtime Freddy in the parts and service room cannot actually kill you. Pressing the different buttons only progresses the minigame forward rather than being an opportunity to kill you. The only part of the minigame where you can die is at the very end with Bonbon. Until then, just follow the instructions and don't worry about messing up. And you also don't need to wait for hand unit to finish talking either. Once you get to the final section, Bonbon has a 50% chance to spawn if he's able to every 3 seconds. When he spawns, he will spawn on the opposite side to one of the 4 spawn triggers, which are the 4 sides of the screen: top left, top right, and bottom right. Every frame your cursor is not overlapping Bonbon, his tolerance meter is increased by 1, up to a maximum of 100. Every frame your cursor is overlapping Bonbon, it will decrease his tolerance meter by 4, and once this reaches 0, Bonbon will hide and wait to spawn again. Just remember that Bonbon actually has a large part of him behind Funtime Freddy, so be quick. Once you get to 45 seconds of not clicking Bonbon's button, Hand Unit tells you to hurry up. If you haven't won this minigame by 2 minutes, then Bonbon will kill you. And that's night 3 completed. Now we move on to the most painful night in the whole game. Night 4 is only one 2-minute and 30-second minigame. However, it's often regarded as the hardest part of the entire game. In this game, you have to defend your suit against the mini-arenas while keeping the spring locks in your suit from going off. Let's start talking about how the spring locks work before moving on to the mini-arenas. Once the minigame starts, each spring lock gets unwound at a random value from 0 to 24. Once a spring lock is unwound by more than 30, a danger alert is shown, and once it reaches a value of 50, you die. The spring lock unwinds by 1 every 200 frames. After 90 seconds, it unwinds by 2, and after 120 seconds, it winds down by 3. Every 0.18 seconds your mouse is held down by a spring lock, it gets wound by 1. Now there are 2 mini-arenas, the side and the middle. The middle ones literally don't do anything, so let's go to the side ones. The mini-arenas that spawn on the right side spawns at set times of 20 seconds, 19 seconds, and 120 seconds, while the left one spawns at 30 seconds, 95 seconds, and 130 seconds. Once their torso begin to disappear off the top of the screen, then you will die. Pressing A or D to shake will unwind every spring lock by 1 and adds a value of 1 or 2 to the mini-arenas. Once they reach 4 or higher, they fall down. And that is night 4. Now we move on to night 5, which is actually really easy and performs exactly how you think it does. The only interesting part is the Circus Baby code. Every time Circus Baby states a number, a value of 1 counts up every second. Getting the code wrong will add 1 to the value. Once this value reaches 3, Maskless Enid kills you. And that's all the main nights. Well, except for one thing, and that's the private room boss fight with Enid. So let's go over that now. Surprisingly, Enid's AI is quite simple to understand. He basically has a 50% chance to move on every interval. However, this movement intervals changes with each hour. At 12 AM, he isn't active for the first 30 seconds. Afterwards, his interval is every 10 seconds. At 1 AM, his interval is changed to every 6 seconds. At 4 AM, his interval is changed to every 3 seconds. And at 5 AM, his interval is every 2 seconds. When the power goes out, his interval is set to every 0.5 seconds regardless of the time. And it has multiple sound effects that play whenever he moves, and they sound like this. However, he has a 1 in 25 chance to not make a sound when he moves. And now for the last part, his camera movements. The only cameras you really need to worry about are cams 1, 2, and 5. Every other camera isn't really a threat, except for the 2 side closets, which I'll explain in a sec how they can be a problem. When in any of those cameras, he has 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2. When in stage 2, he is able to get into the room if the door is open on a successful movement. Now for why the closets can be a problem. And it can go from these 2 cams directly into phase 2 from each side. And that is everything from the main game of Sister Location. Now we can move on to the second and more AI dense part of the game, the Sister Location Custom Night. The Sister Location Custom Night has you once again in the private room, except this time you are not facing Enid, but 10 new and returning animatronics, who all work completely differently to how they work in the base game, which creates a traditional Five Nights at Freddy's experience. So let's go over all the characters and how they work, starting with the returning characters. Funtime Freddy returns with Bonbon for this mode, and he's one of the more difficult characters. He starts in either Cam 3 or Cam 4 and has a 50% chance to start in either. He has a counter value that starts at 30 and counts down every second. When this value equals his AI level, he will switch to the opposite closet, making this sound. That's Funtime Freddy's movements explained, but what about his attacks? Well, every 3 seconds, a random number between 0 and 39 is pulled, and if this number is greater or equal to Funtime Freddy's AI level, and Funtime Freddy has not moved in 4.6 seconds, he will send Bonbon to attack. Bonbon can either attack from the same door or the opposite, having a 2 out of 3 chance to attack from the same side and a 1 out of 3 chance to attack from the opposite side. in which Funtime Freddy says different voice lines depending on where he's going.
Hey, Blood, go get him! Get ready for a surprise!
Bon will be sent the moment the voice line is over, so you only have about a second to deal with them. Funtime Foxy returns to form, acting a lot like Foxy from Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Funtime Foxy has a counter that's set from a random value between 40 and 50, meaning he can be slightly more difficult in some games. This value goes down by 1 every 0.25 seconds, and once it reaches his AI level, he will move and the value is reset to a random number between 30 and 40, making him more aggressive if he actually manages to progress. However, looking at him on the camera resets this value between 40 and 50. You have to be looking at Cam 7 to stall him. Any other camera will not stall him, unlike the original Foxy. Funtime Foxy has 5 stages. Stage 1 is when he's behind the curtain, Stage 2 is when he's peeking out from the curtain, Stage 3 is when he's at the curtain entrance, Stage 4 is when he is fully out, and Stage 5 is when he is gone. Once he leaves, he will attack after 5 seconds. If blocked by the door, he will knock on the door and take 1% power. He will only attack from the right door as well. Once the knocking sound starts, it's safe to open the door, which is something I didn't even mention about the FNAF 1 Foxy. Once they hit the door, they will start in either stage 0 or 1. Ballora has a value of 50 that decreases by 1 every 0.2 seconds. Once this timer reaches Ballora's AI level, she will move. At 4 and 5 AM, her AI level will increase by 5, making her more aggressive as the nights go on. On 1020 mode, which is the only version of this game that people play, let's be completely real, Ballora moves on 6-second intervals at 12 AM, on 5-second intervals at 4 AM, and 4-second intervals at 5 AM. Ballora has 4 stages, which are audibly heard through her crumbling Dreams music volume. Stage 1, she won't make any sound. Stage 2, you will hear her music, but it will be distant. Stage 3, her volume will be moderate and easy to hear, and Stage 4 will be super loud and easy to hear as she is outside your door. Once at the door, she will check every 5 seconds if the door is closed, and if not, she will kill you. Ballora has a movement tree that determines where she is most likely to go. She actually starts in a stage 0 where she has a 33% chance to go to either door or just stay where she is. Once she picks a door, she has a 66% chance to progress forward to stage 2. Once in stage 2, she has a 33% chance to either go back to stage 1, go to stage 3, or even go straight to stage 4, being right outside your door. If she goes to stage 3, she has a 100% chance to make it to your door. Once she leaves, she goes back to stage 0 to reset. Bidybab is the last of the original cast, and their AI is super simple. They spawn in the top vent and they have an AI and 50 chance to move every 3 seconds. Bidybab has 3 stages with a voice line or sound effect tied to each one. Stage 1, she is at the back of the vent and makes this sound.
I don't want to play hide and seek.
Stage 2, she's in the middle of the vent and plays this sound.
I'm going to find a way inside.
And stage 3, she's in the front of the vent and her face plates open and will make her vent sound. Once in stage 3, she'll be able to jump scare the player if they pull the camera up after 3 seconds if the vent is open. However, shutting the vent at this time will get rid of her. However, if you wait till the next 3-second interval, she will jump scare you no matter what. Bidybab's AI level increases by 5 at 4 AM and 10 at 5 AM. Now let's move on to the new characters. Electrobab is quite simple. They have a timer that starts at 30 and counts down by 1 every second. Once it reaches his AI level, they spawn in the opposite closet to where Funtime Freddy is located. Every 5 seconds he drains 1% of your power, but using the shock on him will despawn him. Mini Arena 1 is exactly the same as Electrobab, except they only spawn in camera 6 and take your oxygen. Every time their value is true, they will add 1 to the progress and drain oxygen faster and faster. Here are the values. At 1 progress, they will drain 1% of oxygen every 0.5 seconds. At 2 progress, they will drain 1% of oxygen every 0.25 seconds. At 3 progress, they will drain 1% of oxygen every 0.10 seconds. At 4 progress, they will drain 1% of oxygen every 0.07 seconds. And at 5 progress, they will drain 1% of oxygen every 0.05 seconds. Once you shock them on cam 6, their progress is completely reset. Mini Arena 2 are super simple. They have an AI and 30 chance to spawn a mini arena on your screen, which permanently stays for the whole night. This can happen up to a maximum of 5 mini arenas. Bonnet is another super simple character. She has an AI and 30 chance to spawn when the camera drops. You have to click her nose before she reaches the left side of the screen or she will jump scare you. Her hitbox is slightly bigger than her nose as well. She also can spawn on 2 camera drops in a row unless she's already spawned, meaning if you're the world's unluckiest player, she will spawn on every single camera drop. Yendo is super simple. He has an AI -1 in 25 chance to appear in the office if the camera is pulled down. When he is in your office, he drains oxygen at 1% per 0.02 seconds. If you don't pull the camera back up to remove him, he will kill you after 101 minus 2 times his AI level frames. For example, on 1020, this is about 1 second. He doesn't kill you when the oxygen reaches 0, and he cannot spawn on the next camera drop after you pull the camera up. In other words, he can't spawn on 2 camera drops in a row. And finally, last but not least, we have Lolbit. Lolbit has an AI and 50 chance to spawn every 3 seconds. Once they spawn, they will take over the monitors, which is determined by this formula. 151 minus 3 times their AI level frames. So on 1020, that's about 1.5 seconds. Once they take over all 3 monitors, the please stand by screen will appear. Once this happens, you cannot pull up the cameras or use the doors until they leave. Typing LOL on the keyboard will reset their progress, with a 5-second cooldown before they can spawn again. You can also type LOL into the keypad on the wall, but that's stupidly hard. And that is Sister Location's main game and custom nights explained, which hopefully you guys learned something. Now we move on to a much more simple game in terms of AI, and that's FNAF Pizzeria Simulator. FNAF Pizzeria Simulator has 3 separate gameplay loops, however only 2 of these actually involve any animatronics. All 4 characters actually behave pretty much the same way, so unlike the previous games where I went over every single character individually, I'll be going over how the gameplay works and what slight differences are between any of the characters, if there is any. The 4 characters are Molten Freddy, Scraptrap, Scrap Baby, and Lefty. Let's begin by discussing the salvage sections. In the salvage sections, you need to document the animatronics' responses to certain sound cues / audio prompts, and shock them with your taser if they become too aggressive in order to get a payout. There are 5 audio prompts each time, and each audio prompt lasts a set amount of time. Prompt 1 is 33 seconds, Prompt 2 is 18 seconds, Prompt 3 is 21 seconds, Prompt 4 is 14 seconds, and Prompt 5 is 38 seconds. Each animatronic has a different value if you successfully manage to salvage them. Molten Freddy will give you $500, Scraptrap will give you $1,000, Scrap Baby will give you $2,000, and Lefty will give you a whopping $5,000. However, if you use the shock on the animatronic more than 3 times, you only get half the money, and any more than 4 times will give you a measly $100. Each animatronic has an aggression meter that goes from 0 to 1,200, and starts between 0 and 100. Every 10 seconds that the tape is playing, there is a 50% chance for the aggression to increase by 150 plus 50 times the night number. Every second that you are looking at your page, which you need to do to progress, the aggression is increased by 10 plus 10 times the night number frames. Each animatronic has 3 visual stages to show what state of aggression they are in, with stage 1 being when they haven't moved at all. Once they reach 250 progress, they will change to stage 2, and at 500 they will go to stage 3. Please note that you can't see the change until you flip the page. Here is what each stage looks like for each animatronic. Here's Molten Freddy. Here's Scraptrap. Scrap Baby. And Lefty. Also, as a side note, when listening to the 4th prompt, there's a 50% chance it will automatically bring up the aggression to 750, so be aware. The animatronic will jump scare you once you flip the page at 1000 aggression or straight up kill you at 1200 aggression. Each animatronic also has a different sound effect that plays once they reach 750 aggression, and it gets louder at 900 aggression with a volume of 3 and 5 respectively. However, these sounds in-game are super quiet. Molten Freddy's sound effect is popping and clicking. Scrap Baby's sound effect is a heartbeat. Scrap Baby's sound effect is metallic rattling. And Lefty's sound effect is mechanical whirring. Using the taser resets the animatronic's aggression to a random progress of 0 to 300 aggression. And that's everything you need to know about the salvage section. Now let's move on to the main office section of the game. In the office section, this is the vent map which each animatronic can appear. They will start at a random square on the top row. Each animatronic gets a movement opportunity at a certain interval, which changes each night. However, while the interval that they can move on can change, the chance to move does not, as it is always a straight 1 in 3 chance for the animatronics to move. Here are the intervals for each night. Monday is every 8 seconds, although it won't start until the tutorial stops. Tuesday is every 5 seconds. Wednesday is every 4 seconds. Thursday is every 3 seconds, Friday is every 2.5 seconds, and Saturday is every 2 seconds. However, there is also a separate monotony timer that is to be present from night 3 and beyond. If you don't move in 30 seconds, the animatronics will start having movement opportunities every 2 seconds, and at 45 seconds, the intervals change to every seconds. For where each animatronic is going to move, it gets complicated, but looking at this chart made by itzdingo, you can see what the chances of movement actually are. Now we get to talk about teleportation, and no, I'm not joking, these motherfuckers can teleport. Each animatronic can only teleport once per night, but each animatronic has a different spot, which they can use the first time they hit this spot after a certain time of the night. Molten Freddy can do this after 10 seconds, while Scrap Baby and Scrap Trap can do this after 20 seconds. They teleport from the top middle vent to your side vents, Molten Freddy on the left and Scrap Trap and Scrap Baby on the right. And no, Lefty cannot teleport, which is due to a coding error, similar to how the ventilation does not naturally go out in FNAF 3 Night 6. Now the last thing to discuss is how the animatronics actually hear you. The animatronics will always have a 1 in 10 chance to hear you no matter what you are doing, but certain actions like turning on the fan, the computer, doing a task, or an ad playing changes this and makes it more likely for them to hear you, which for most things is a 20% chance increase. The animatronics can only hear you if they are in the adjacent vents next to your office. If they hear you and you don't have the flashlight shone on them, they will enter and kill you. If the light is shined on them, they will retreat back to the far room. However, if they don't hear you, they will go to the middle right vent regardless if you have the light on them or not. The flashlight will also clear characters from the vent next to the side vent if you have everything turned off. However, when an animatronic has entered the office, they will jump scare you when you next turn or after a 5-second interval. And there we have it. Every single animatronic from the first 7 mainline FNAF games explained. I'm sorry they didn't end up explaining any of the other games, but without the AI to back it up, it's really not that interesting. All the characters kind of behave the way you think they do. And well, Security Breach is a fucking mess. But even though it wasn't really every single FNAF game, this was a monster video that took a ton of effort to make. Although be sure to check all the links in the description taking you to all the videos, documents, and other sources where I got this information from. And be sure to give everyone some love. And of course, if you've managed to make it through this entire video, be sure to subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100k by the end of the year, and it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe. And if this video gets 10,000 likes, I'll make an AI analysis of FNAF World, dissecting everything, and I'll try and get some special faces in there as well. But anyways, with that out of the way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.